What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here, another Steelers touchdown on the live. Hope you like the new quick intro that we had there. Joe Devil's already in the live chat. That is fantastic to see. Good to see you, mate. Can't wait for the Q&A component. Well, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it has been a big week out there. We've seen everything from the Steelers signing an offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. We've seen a bunch of discussion around which players are going to come in and out, who fits with Arthur Smith, who doesn't. We've also seen the Senior Bowls underway. These were Shrine Bowls underway as well, that whole process. And so the Steelers' real offseason, their march into 2024, is definitely starting to take shape. Mike Tomlin's been another key figure at the Senior Bowl again, like he always is. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see some of those takes, what's going on, who he's liking, who he's not. It's funny, I've done about 4 or 5 videos now on the channel around Senior Bowl prospects. It's kind of hard because you kind of look at the list and there's guys that like you're interested to see that you think that'll move up the draft boards as the process goes. And then you gotta know that is a guy that's a Steelers player. Like, so for example, we did a video, I talked about 5 to 6 defensive linemen. One of the guys I was thinking about talking about was Michael Hall Jr. at Ohio State. I looked at him and went, oh, the Steelers are going to love his pedigree. I don't love the whereabouts where he's going to be drafted because I think he's going to fall that way Benton fell, and I think that's high investment for a defensive end and a defensive tackle. So didn't fully love that when I sort of looked at it from the prospects that I wanted to watch. But then you hear, as Daredevil brings up in the live chat, guys like Jackson Powers-Johnson, who Shannon and I talked about him on our Steelers Global Perspective yesterday in our sort of first look at some Senior Bowl standouts. He's actually in the thumbnail of this video, or in the intro part. That's the guy in silver helmet. But yeah, Jackson Powers-Johnson is someone we are definitely going to talk about. He is rocketing up the boards. For instance, I can tell you that on the Pro Football Network's mock draft simulator, not PFF, but Pro Football Network's, this guy's like moved from in the 50s to the 60s, right up into 35. Crazy stuff from Jackson Powers-Johnson. I mean, I'm keen to see the final measurements for him, but if I'm seeing a guy that's 6'5" and like 325 pound, that's the guy you want. I know that Shannon loves Zach Frazier, but Shannon said this guy's probably the all-around best prospect. I think he's a lot better than Van Pran. And you know what? I think even if the Steelers are looking at pick 20, if their favorite tackle's not on the board, what if you do go get your center at 20, or you trade back to 23, 24, 25, 28? I don't think bust 28 is a good idea, because then you're sort of out of the loop in the guys that fall to the back end of that slip 5 or 6 spots. But Jackson Powers-Johnson, 4-year guaranteed deal, then you've got a 5th-year option on him. That could be very, very cheap in the long term for the Steelers. It also means you knuckle down on a center for 5 years, no matter whether it's Pickett, Mason, whoever's there in 5 years' time, or someone that they've drafted. Maybe it's Arch Manning out of Texas that they draft in 2025 or 2026. Probably 2026 for him. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting from that perspective on the guys that are developing. Another guy that I was really interested to see was Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. And then I feel like I did a video on him that came out Wednesday, US time. Since I've spoken about him, the guy's been getting notoriety in so many different places. So he's the talk of the town. I said to Shannon White, he could be like Sky Moore, who Shannon was really high on, and still thinks Sky Moore would be better on Steelers offense. But then when I think about, hey, Pittsburgh Toddy as well. But yeah, when I think about, Corley, I mean, this is a guy who'll be about 5'11". I was just listening to DJ's top 50 prospects. I read it yesterday, but I was listening to his show with Lance Zerline on it. They were calling him they were saying he's another Deebo Samuel. I mean, imagine that guy. That would be huge for the Steelers offense. I know we've got Calvin Austin as the twitchy guy, but this would give you an opportunity to go, well, do we need to shop around DJ? Do we trade DJ for a top cornerback? Or, does this guy come in and learn? And then we've got 4 really, decent wide receivers. Like, that's the other option you've got with this. So, pretty interesting in terms of some of the narratives that are coming out and all the different options. It is something that I get a feeling with this draft, that this is one of the few drafts in a long time where you'd love to be able to trade back and add picks. Steelers got so many holes, that's part of it, but the talent spread is so wide. If you can get as many 2nd and 3rd round picks as you can, you are going to have a great time. At the same time, there are a lot of people that say there's only really 15 genuine first rounders in this draft as well. That doesn't mean that all those guys can be even picked in the first round, and we know how the draft works. So those things together are pretty interesting narratives around how do the Steelers go about that draft process? How do you get value at different positions? So I want to do two things before we get into some Q&A. So Dan Jeremiah's put out his top 10 standouts. You're going to see this. A lot of the league put them out throughout the course of the 3 days. But he said you got to focus on 10 players. I thought it was interesting because 7 of the guys about 30, 31, because I think I gave bonus in the offensive line video. But 7 out of his 10 guys are all featured in the 31 that we talked about. So that's kind of interesting. Before we get into that, Pittsburgh Toddy says trading Deontay would be a mistake. I kind of wonder if it would be too in the Arthur Smith offense. I've seen people say he doesn't fit, but you're relying very heavily on Pickens. So you'd still need to go and get a veteran wide receiver in free agency. So the move has to happen soon. It's not like DJ. If DJ was getting paid maybe $3 to $5 million more a year, I think that then you go, is the money fully worth it? But at his price point, with a $5 million dead cap hit, with the amount of other dead cap they're going to have, you know what, Toddy? Like, I don't disagree. But yeah, I mean, Jed, I think this is a better draft, though, to get guys than last year. So that's going to be the interesting thing is, can the Steelers do it in a better draft? All right, just taking a quick sip there because I've got a sore throat. All right, so let's look at these 7 guys that will stand out. So the top 10 practice winners, Malachi Cooley straight up there. Love to see this. I'm not going to go too much about him. He has made the top 50. I think he's even in the top 25 for Daniel Jeremiah. Braden Fisk, though, a DT out of Florida State. Now, this guy apparently made play after play. I saw that a bit on tape as well. I thought the arms were an issue when I'd heard about them before the Senior Bowl, but I liked the production out of him, and that's what I said when we did the video about him. Also, he was at Western Michigan, transferred to Florida State. Florida State it was. Yeah, definitely not Florida. But Florida State this past year, they had a really good season as well. So I like this guy, Braden Fisk, this big dude. In the defensive tackle position. This is a guy that, like, if he was there in the third, very early in the fourth, you'd love it. I mean, if he was sitting there in the middle to the back in the third, I'd even think about trading back in. We need guys to help out Cam. We need guys to help on the defensive line. Go get a young guy here that's just ready to eat. Talisi Fagua, I don't think he's not going to be remotely in the mix when the Steelers are picking, so we'll skip him. I did talk about Tyler Guyton. He wasn't amongst the original set of guys I was talking about. But as I was talking about them, I kept thinking I loved what this guy had to offer from a stats perspective. The size, 6'7", 328 pounds. Daniel Jeremiah was not just saying it here on the screen. He said it in his podcast with Lance Zerline. He said this guy is definitely a guy that you'll see in the top 20. And I think all reports, Mike Tomlin really liked him too. So he might be the guy at 20 if the Steelers stay at 20. If Amara Mims is off the board, he might be the guy anyway. I love that size. Can you imagine that guy anchoring with Broderick on the other side? Like power, crazy power line. Now, then when you've got Theo Johnson, he was like the only real tight end we talked about as well when I was doing the previews of the guys. Oh, I've switched across. Previews of the guys at the Senior Bowl. This is a guy that had 12 touchdowns, 938 yards. Give a bit of context, Pat Freeman, when he was drafted out of Penn State, had 16 touchdowns and 1,100, and I think it's 85 or 35. I know it ends in a 5, and I know it's in the 1100s. So Theo Johnson, the Steelers kind of would know what they're going to get. Theo Johnson doesn't have a second-round grade on him. Some people I've seen him mocked in the 5th and the 6th. I think he can go back into the 4th, depending on the combine process he has. I had someone question me in the comments of that video saying, why the Steelers need a tight end? And that's a fair point. But I think you think about Arthur Smith joining particularly, but you also think they're going to default for a little while to keep Darnell Washington on blocking. Pat Freeman suffers injuries because he has to do everything all the time. And Connor Hayward is that fullback / H-back / smaller tight end. I still think they need another big bloke out there that's like 6'5" plus, 250 pound plus, the all-rounder. I think that's really important. And that also takes the pressure off Darnell as he learns to be a better receiver for the Steelers as a tight end. Then you had Quinion Mitchell. I mean, there's been so much talk about Quinion Mitchell. I'm not going to sit here and labor the point about Quinion Mitchell. He's probably even, unless the Steelers are going to take a cornerback at 20 and take the 50-year deal, he's probably off the board for the Steelers right now. But he was someone that definitely I was hoping kind of would fly on, have a good Senior Bowl, but fly under the radar. And then maybe the Steelers can get him in the second round and do a Joey Porter Jr. 2.0. I don't think that's going to happen. But definitely a guy. Congratulations to this guy because he is making his money right now. Then you get to Michael Penix Jr., who a lot of Steelers fans are on. I'm like not analyzing the quarterbacks outside the outsider guys in the late rounds. I just don't think they're going there. I don't think it's a worthy time. I also don't think Penix is worth the 20th pick in the draft. If people have concerns about Kenny Pickett, I have concerns about, Michael Penix Jr. Darius Robinson's an interesting guy. I don't think he really fits a 3-4, so I don't think the Steelers are in the mix for him. I do have him in my Madden 2026 season right now. But, I just don't think he necessarily fits what they're going to do. Then there's Peyton Wilson. Now, I love this guy when I was reading about him, when I heard he made the Super Bowl. The Senior Bowl. That's a bit of a – maybe he gets the Steelers to the Super Bowl if we can, draft him. But this guy has moved right up the boards from a day 3 into a day 2 pick according to Daniel Jeremiah. I think the production with him, he's, 380 plus tackles. He's got sacks. He's got, I think it was 28 plus tackles for a loss. This guy's massive production. He's going to rocket up the boards. To me, he is like the Drew Sanders of last year's draft. Or you'll see him make the same level of rise. Obviously, he's not going to probably make it in the first round, but he'll make a fast rise up everyone's attention the way Jack Campbell did from kind of mid-Feb into the draft process and then ended up getting taken in the first round by Detroit. So Peyton Wilson, look out for him, but he's a big guy, 6'4". I think he'll test they measured him at 230 or they at 234 pounds. I think you'll see him more like 240 come the combine. They'll add a bit of size to his frame, but he can still add size to his frame, long, kind of rangy. I like this guy. I think this guy could be interesting. Then you got Roman Wilson, who, again, by all accounts, had a really, really good Senior Bowl when he could play. He did have a niggling injury. He ran about a bunch of routes that he hadn't run before. Really cool backstory on this guy, too. Go read into that. That's definitely worth some time. Really good character, really solid character. But I guess as we move into it as well, I don't know if anyone else has been deeply watching the Senior Bowl. Throw it in the live chat if there's anyone that you thought was interesting there or you wanted my take on how they performed. Because the Senior Bowl as well, a lot of people get enamored by these practices, but I also want to see the game. I want to see these guys against each other. I want to see them properly hitting each other. The line drills can be really, really, really helpful. Sometimes I wonder about the cornerback wide receiver drills. People can have good days and bad days. But the other key narrative coming out of the Senior Bowl is the fact that the quarterbacks are not performing as well as people thought they were. But interesting, alternatively, I've heard differently about the East Coast Shrine Bowl. So we might see some very interesting quarterback rankings between now and the draft. Okay. Right. Well, let's get into the top 50 for Daniel Jeremiah. I thought this would be helpful. Hey, Reginald, what's up? I thought this would be helpful for everyone out there because, and while I'm doing this, cook up those questions, really do want to get into some Q&A. I thought this would be helpful because these will now start to come out. You get some Bucky Brooks top 50. You get all the other people's top 50. There's been top 200s on PFF. People are doing this. But I wait for the top 50 from Daniel Jeremiah. I kind of generally know who's going to be in the top 150. There's about 20 or 30 guys that I can predict in there that people don't call. And usually I can pick the Steelers, who the Steelers will draft out of that. Have done a couple of years in a row. But I want to talk to these guys because I'm not going to start. We're going to quickly go past the top 10 because these guys aren't really in it. But I want to talk through the top 50 because there's names that you're not going to see and they're things to think about as the Steelers not only approach the draft, but how do they approach free agency? What are the gaps that they can't fill in the draft that they should fill in free agency? But also, you've got no guarantees in the draft. People trade, as we know, up, down, and everywhere. You might not get the guy that you think you're going to get. So, this, it's a bit of a gamble some years. I'd love to find out one day, not just on the Steelers, but I'd love there to be a book written about guys that teams wanted to draft and then didn't end up drafting. That would be pretty interesting. Guys that thought they were going to get this guy and then they didn't. I, for instance, heard in the podcast about this top 50 with Lance Zerline and Daniel Jeremiah that I listened to this morning while I was walking my dog before the show. I heard them say they think Drake May could fall. And he might slide further than people think. Maybe not the full Will Levis slide, but further than people think. I thought to myself, if he falls into the teens, do you take that punt? Like, I don't think the Steelers need a quarterback. I don't think they're going to go draft a quarterback. But, like, do you think... And I obviously I don't want to see a better quarterback play, but I just don't think the draft is where they can fill it this year. Would that be like a Big Ben slide? Like, it's tempting, isn't it? So anyway, that's why we'll talk through these guys. But Toddy brings up the point before I get stuck into that side of the show. So Arthur Smith uses a lot of 12 and 22 formations as opposed to our frequent use of 11 under Canada. How does this affect the offensive personnel usage? Yeah, so the good news is I think it lessens the need for the Steelers to have 4 decent wide receivers. Now, when I say decent, I'm not calling Calvin Austin not decent. He is kind of third on the roster because you could think they'd be cutting Allen Robinson with the $10 million saving that they can make. But what I do think is a problem is I don't think they've got a big enough wide receiver outside of Pickens for his system. So that's a wide receiver component. I don't think, as I mentioned there, reflecting on Theo Johnson, we have enough at the tight end spot. If we just like move Connor Howard aside to fullback, and yes, I know he can catch the ball, and yes, I know he can play the tight end sets. Yes, I know Kenny Pickett has chemistry with him as well. But I do think we either need to get a pass catching tight end, or they need to get a big wide receiver like Drake London. But or I mean, you can talk about any big wide receiver, like a Lazard or even MVS. But the problem, I think, is that developing that guy. So I don't want the Steelers investing a high pick on a big wide receiver. And there's not, to be honest, apart from Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, there's not really a big wide receiver that I really quite like anyway. I mean, if the Steelers go get him, that could answer both questions, which is why I talked about him on my guys to watch at the Senior Bowl at the wide receiver position. But they're going to have to find one of those guys. I also think with the run game, I hope that he can balance the different traits of Warren and Harris. I do. But the bigger benefit overall, and I know that Chris Carter and Jenna Hana talked about this, and I mean, it's dead obvious. It's the one thing we thought we'd see last year to help Kenny Pickett out, and it didn't happen because Matt Canada, I just don't think he had it in his offensive system properly, but play action. So I think that's going to be huge. I'd love to see some 3 tight end sets with Warren in there where they basically end up all blocking, even if it's an RPO, but it's an RPO where instead of the run, Warren slips out to the side and catches the pass. That could be really helpful. I think the double Najee Warren sets, maybe this finally gets Najee into the receiving game. Like there is, like back to when he's rookie with Ben, the Titans have worked Derrick Henry into the passing game at times on some key plays when everyone's expecting a run. So that could be huge. I don't think whether we'll see as much screen game from Arthur Smith, considering the Steelers do have 2 running backs. I'm not saying that he doesn't use a screen game. I'm just thinking with the 2 running backs the Steelers have versus what the Titans had, you might see a little bit less of that. So that's kind of interesting. Kelly Kaiser, I want to see if there's a trick here. We have to go O-line in the second and then a center. Agree. But as I said at the start of the show, actually, I think it's interesting the concept of getting a center with the 5th-year option and then actually let the player play his natural position. Exactly. Thank you. I completely agree. Exactly. This is the case with Kevin Dotson. Why did we not play him on the right? I know DeCastro was there, but once DeCastro left, you move him over. Broderick Jones, he's at left tackle. That's why I was actually pleased to hear about Guyton. A lot of teams will say Guyton is a left tackle. I like having a big right tackle there. You want the Mauler in Broderick Jones, and then you just want a big body there at Guyton. And as Lance Zierlein and Danny Jeremiah rightly said, which not people don't say, because a lot of people just focus on left tackle all the time, a lot of teams put their best rusher, including the Steelers, we do it with TJ, put them on the side facing the right tackle. You need a good right tackle. So I could completely concur with this, Kelly. I fantastic. Love it. Yeah, no, I gotcha. I mean, I know you meant tackle, and really tackle anyway, because like it's no point in getting rid of Ciamalo and Daniels. So yeah, Jed Devil. Yeah, Reginald, he's interesting. Is it Brendan Rice out of USC? I thought he would be a lot higher going into the draft. I don't think he had as good a year working with Caleb on the screen right now. I want to get Caleb off the screen. He's got no chance of being a Steeler. I don't want him to be a Steeler. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he falls and what his combine process is. I wonder. I do wonder. All right. Well, let's get into these prospects. So I can quickly say that Caleb Williams is highly, 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 highly unlikely. I'd bet money on it that he is not going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Same with Marvin Harrison Jr. Same as Roma Dunze, Drake May. We can talk about Jaden Daniels. I know people love the Steelers to go and get this guy. It's just not going to happen. His draft stock is rising so high anyway. Even Steelers need a quarterback. We'd have to sell the farm. Terran Arnold's killing it. He's very fast become the top cornerback in this draft. Huge for him. I think he's converted over from safety as well. I was kind of hoping that he'd have a slip and then he might be available at 20. Not going to happen. Malik Neighbors, same thing. He's way out. Again, I thought if he fell at 20, he'd be a really good solution if the Steelers wanted to have a young wide receiver, cheap on the cap, fifth-year option. The thing for me always the first round is I don't just think about the talent. I also think about the fifth-year option. Fifth-year option is a really crucial aspect. Brock Bowers, surely he's over at the Chargers. Everyone's talked about that. That's going to happen. Funny, he slipped in a mock draft the other night for me to 20, and I was like, God, it would be attractive to get that guy with Arthur Smith. But we do need O-line help. And as I've said countless times in videos since the end of the season, we have to fix the lines first. Don't fix the other positions until you fix the line. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Heath. Awesome. Great to have you in the chat. That's a pretty good segue as well. What do you think of Amaris Mims from Georgia? Yeah, I mean, I like Mims. I do like Mims. I like the idea of putting a couple more Georgia guys together. Then you kind of wonder, do they just go Van Pran in the second, particularly if Powers Johnson's off the board? I think there's a bit of development work from Mims to happen. And I will just say one thing about the line guys is sometimes when you're playing on a good, a team with the pedigree that like a team like Georgia's had the last few years, or for a long time really, but sometimes you've got guys around you that might hide challenges. I want to watch more tape from Mims. I wouldn't hate it if they draft him at 20, but I'm also not going to, I'm going to cheer about it. I do think Guyton's a better prospect by the sounds of things, and he's moving up those boards. But yeah, completely don't hate it. Like that guy looks terrific. He was my guy. I was happy I kept seeing him mocked at 20 for the last sort of 6 weeks. I was kind of cool. I was cool with that. I was like, bring him in. We got Broderick there. We got Darnell. Let's just do it. Let's have the Georgia O-line. But yeah, as you said, he's quite young. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is about the experience. And there's some of these guys, some of these tackles that have played a lot more football. So that's kind of key for me. But then the other thing about Mims is he's played a lot of snaps within the years he's played. So you got to balance that out too. Like there's guys that might have played like 35, 40 plus games. I think he's played 32 off the top of my head with Mims. Broderick came out with like 25. But with Mims, I think he's played like plus 900 snaps in each of those seasons, or at least plus 800. Yeah, well, that's why we're going to talk about some cornerbacks here, because there's some good cornerbacks here. Yeah, I agree with you, Jet. We've got to move Broderick. All right, so then you get Joe Alt. Again, love him to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. I just don't think unless we're trading back up to 14 and doing a Broderick 2.0, which I don't know if I love doing that because of the holes the Steelers need, and we need as many draft picks as possible. I've also talked about this, and it'll be a narrative I build out between now and the draft, but you've seen a lot of guys that have played 5, 6, 4 years in college coming out in this draft because of that COVID eligibility year. They've also been consistent with one team. The portal is changing that, and as guys move out that haven't, that started college after the COVID year, you're going to see guys that have had a lot of chop and change. So this year, I think you're going to get a lot of experienced guys in the draft, which is why I'm cool with the Steelers using picks next year to get back into this draft, because you're going to get experienced guys that know systems. And if those systems are similar to yours, they stand a good stead of acclimating and maturing and developing at a faster rate. So that's one narrative that just I wanted to give that context as we go through these top 50 and where they fit the Steelers and where they don't. And so the first few rounds, it is something that I'll continue to talk about and explore. So yeah, anyway, so we move down and we get past top 10, Dallas Turner, we move past him at edge. I don't think Steelers looking for edge. I think this guy, Talisi Fuaga, Daniel Jeremiah said, I know, probably butchered his name, Aussie accent too, but this is a guy that Daniel Jeremiah has also said is probably considered maybe the top tackle in the draft. I just don't think he's anywhere near the Steelers, even if we trade up to 15. Same as now, Fashanu is interesting because we've talked about a lot of guys right now that have moved up, and obviously we've been focused on the Senior Bowl, only Senior Bowls. Seniors, and in this context, juniors have been a select number of juniors have been invited. We talked about a lot of tackles that could be improving their stock. Now, then it all gets balanced out from guys that weren't at Easter Shrine Bowl, weren't at the Senior Bowl at the Combine. So we'll see where these guys chop and change and fall, because we don't have a lot to talk about tackles. What if Fashanu falls? The Steelers know Fashanu too, being in Penn State. So this could be a really interesting concept for the Steelers and a type of player that even like a month ago, people would have said there's no way the Steelers are getting Fashanu. So I'm kind of keen to definitely keep watching and building on him and holding out hope, because, I mean, I like a lot of what I see there. But again, this is a guy that's probably want him to play on the left, and we need Broderick to play on the left, not the right. So that's another thing that comes into play. Then you got JC Latham. He's kind of slipping down the boards a bit. I really like him, though. I think if you got him at 20, just like Mims, you'd have to be pretty happy there. The good thing about him, though, is that he is a right tackle. And that's really solid for the Steelers. We don't have to compete with trade up to get guys that are a left or a right tackle. He just slots in there. And I've seen him slip way past the Steelers at 20 to 25, 28, 29, and some mocks, even back-ended for the Chiefs at like 32 in some different systems when I run them. So JC Latham could well be a Steeler more than people realize. Jared Verse, again, I don't really think the Steelers are going down that route. Brian Thompson Jr. out of LSU. Now, he's a guy I'm actually a little bit less familiar with. Again, I think the Steelers are going to go for a big piece to fill a gap with top talent. So I don't think wide receiver is on the board for the Steelers at 20. They trade it back later into the late 20s in terms of picks. Maybe that comes back into play. But we'll see. Then you've got Fortanu out of Washington. Again, I've really butchered that name. Also, we say some, people of Pacific Island background. Names a bit different here, but again, why Washington? I think there's better prospects, and he played on the left. I don't see it. I'd much prefer Guyton, the next guy. I've talked a lot about Guyton. We won't spend more time on Guyton. I feel like the show's pretty much just been about Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. But I really like this guy. And then we get to Mims. So the one thing to note, we're at pick number 18 right now, or rank number 18 for Daniel Jeremiah. I think we've talked literally about 8 to 10 tackles. So this is a tackle-heavy draft. Really good thing for the Steelers, because you want to tackle. You want tackles to be cheap, as much cheap as you can make them. You get a guy on a 50-year deal. That's absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. All right. Then you've got Quinion Mitchell, who we talked getting back into the cornerback spot. Man, I just don't think there's enough teams out. Like, the top 18 picks are not going to have 10 tackles going in them. So I think Quinion Mitchell is off the board very early on. I think you'll be struggled. I think someone might even trade up to go grab him. I struggle to see him past pick 15 unless something terrible happens injury-wise or at the Combine. This guy's a top 15 pick. Then you get to a guy like Cooper out of Texas A&M. Now, the thing about Cooper, he's kind of flown under the radar a bit for me. There's a few other linebackers, but also because of where he's been ranked in a lot of things since sort of mid-college season, I kind of felt that he'd be out of the Steelers, sort of out of the mix for the Steelers, because we do have Holcomb. They probably look to re-sign Quan. They've got Landon Roberts. They don't have to invest a first-round pick on a linebacker, even while he could be really cool. If they went and picked him at 20, I wouldn't hate it. But I don't think that is going to necessarily help you score points, and their defense, the Steelers' defense, is good enough at stopping teams from scoring points that they need to just work out how they can score 30. All right, let's keep going. So we're halfway through the top 50. We'll keep motoring. Latu, great player. The Steelers aren't going after that guy. Just in terms of with our edge rushers, with this guy's pedigree, he's probably a top 12, top 13 pick. So yeah, we probably don't see him. Brian Murphy's an interesting one. I wonder whether a 4-3 team will go after Byron Murphy the second. Loved him as he played for Texas. Most of Steelers TDU community out there know I am a Texas Longhorns fan. Look, Byron Murphy, be a great player. Would absolutely not hate it. I just don't know whether you need to spend a first-round pick on one of these guys unless you're trading back in to get a guy that falls. And even then, that's going to be a big investment. You better like the guy. But he is a nasty, nasty defensive tackle. You do not want to be playing this guy. I hope he doesn't get drafted by a team that the Steelers have to play for a very long time, because I think he would rip the interior of our own line apart. So that tells you how much I like Byron Murphy. You got Bo Nix there. Bo Nix, apparently Tom was having a good chat to him, but I have heard his deep ball was not good. And I've seen it on some tape as well. Not good. Not that great in college, but not good at the Senior Bowl. Some errant passes. If that's the case, people had enough. I look back on some of the criticisms of Kenny the last couple of years about throwing it deep and that sort of stuff. I just don't see it. So yeah, we'll move him aside. Now, this is a guy I'm keen to look a bit more into. Hey, Fuzzy Monkey, you've seen the live chat, mate. Rakestraw. Now, a guy that's fallen under the radar a little bit for me, junior out of Missouri. Missouri does generally develop some pretty cool defensive backs. So I'm interested in this guy because I've heard, I'm listening up to Daniel Jeremiah. This is a guy that's just rocketed up his boards. I want to go watch his tape. I want to go look at his height, weight, speed, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to go look at the Dan Jeremiah's reference in this summary to look back at the Georgia game. I want to know more about this guy, because this is a guy that maybe doesn't have the pedigree that other people have in terms of, playing necessarily from a top college. But again, if this could be your Joey Porter Jr. that slips into the back end of the second, the early end of the second, or if the Steelers were to trade back and then end up with multiple picks in the second, you go that, or you flip it, you come back in the first. This will be a really interesting guy to see through the draft process, where this guy falls. This could be very interesting. But it's hard because, as I say, we're now through 24 or 25 of these picks of this top 50. And again, the majority of the guys we've talked about are tackle, and that is a need for the Steelers. So it's hard. It's hard to kind of move us out of having to drafting a tackle with pick 20, or even if we were to trade back or trade up a little bit, depending on the guy. It's really hard to move out of that spot because the Steelers do need line help. But that's all right. There's plenty of times Daniel Jeremiah puts someone in the top 50 that doesn't get, and obviously there's 50 players. There's only 32 picks in round one. So someone's got to fall to the back, so got to fall into the second round. Hey, Steeler Girl 808, what's going on? All right. Let's keep going. Chop Robinson, another edge player. This guy's really interesting. I have found interesting in terms of the analysis on this guy. I just don't think he's in the mix for the Steelers. Then you got Tez Walker. Now, this is a guy that catches a heap of deep balls. I heard that his average depth of target, so when he's receiving the ball, is 18 yards. Huge, crazy. He had 41 receptions for 17 per catch in 8 games last year, so that's pretty crazy. The Steelers pick him at 20. I'm not going to sit there and hate it. I think there's better positions where we need more depth to go after this guy. So then we move on to JJ McCarthy. Again, this guy's rocketed up the boards. I don't have a first round grade on this guy. I have a second round grade and barely a second round grade on him. Fine if the Steelers got him in the second for depth and cheap quarterback, and if they lost Mason Rudolph, but please no. Please no. So do I, Jet, and that's why Malachi Corley for me. I'm like, oh my god, could they? There's a few other guys as well, which we'll talk about. Particularly the guy Cowing, who I think injured himself as well, out of Arizona. He could be a guy in the 4th or the 5th that could be an absolute steal. But again, if he has a good draft process, you see him in the 3rd. Then we move on to Newton out of Illinois. Dan Jeremiah is very high on this guy. He had him in maybe a top 15 pick. Again, this guy's tape's pretty cool. He might have a really strong combine. I wouldn't hate it if the Steelers go get a defensive tackle at 20. I just don't think it's as big a need as getting a top tier tackle, which you can do in this draft, unlike other drafts. Sometimes there's only a couple. And then you got Cooper DeJean. Now, remember as well, this is the rankings of Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 prospects. Doesn't always speak for how people are going to be drafted or mock drafts. He does the mock drafts based on what he's hearing in the league, or not what he'd pick. Yep, we will definitely be talking about strong safety in a minute. Good point, Daredevil. Daredevil always keep me on task here. But Cooper DeJean definitely fallen back in some of the different rankings I've seen. Still a great player. Huge, going to be huge for whichever team gets him. Going to be really versatile defensive back. I kind of like that idea for the Steelers. This is your Joey Porter 2.0 that you want to get. It's full early into the second trade up to get him. So that's kind of key. I did too, JDA. I agree. I don't know whether there's the strong safety there to do it, but second or third round, I really like the idea of James Williams out of Miami. But yeah, we'll get to that, especially when we keep talking about middle linebackers. I know that's not Toddy, but actually back to middle linebacker part. You also see the situation with there's guys like Cedric Gray out there. There's guys like Junior Colson, who I think Junior Colson will have a great draft process and he'll be way more up the rankings than what he is right now. We've also got Jay Ford out of Texas. I like Jay Ford. I just want to make sure that he fully fits with a 3-4 defense. I definitely know he can play well on a 4-3. I want to see a bit more from him. I want to do my due diligence on my analysis to make sure I'm fully locked into that pick, not just like a guy. I never want to be accused of liking a guy just because he goes to the college team I support or played for the college team that I support. Hey, Steeler Weight Show. All right. Now move to Nate Wiggins. Now, Nate Wiggins is an interesting cornerback. A lot of people have him all over that draft process. He's a guy that's very physical, really, really physical. So he could be interesting. I think with Quinion Mitchell's rise up the board, that's hurt Wiggins because you saw Wiggins mocked anywhere between like 15 and 25. He's a guy that could fall. He might not be the Steelers necessarily, but he comes out of a good school like Clemson. But he could be the Joey Porter 2.0 in this draft that another team might pick up. So that could be interesting. I wouldn't hate if the Steelers got him because of that fifth-year option. Or if he got him in the first. I think 20 is a little bit higher for him in terms of the prospects that will be available, though. Then you got Jordan Morgan. Now, this is a guy that I previewed. He's one of the 31 guys I previewed going to the Senior Bowl. Jordan Morgan is a really good tackle. He's a guy that if you traded back into like 24, 25, 26, 27, he should be available. Maybe he slips to the early second, but there'll be a team that finds a way to get back in the first and grab this guy, fifth-year option. His stats are pretty cool. He's played a ton of games, not allowed a bunch of sacks. PFF, I think, had him at 6'6" or 6'7". I want to see what he actually measures at. He did have ACL surgery a year ago, so that'll be a factor that feeds into the mix in terms of where he's drafted and what his perspective is. But watch, he will have a good combine, and people will be talking about this guy as a bona fide first-round pick. That's what I feel from all the evidence I've seen to date. And he's had pretty good Senior Bowl so far. So let's also see what he does in the actual Senior Bowl game too. Then you got Darius Robinson out of Missouri, defensive tackle. This guy, a big bloke, he was in Dan Jeremiah's top 10 best performers at the week. I don't think he's going to fit what we want or what we need necessarily for the 3-4 defense, but big explosive guy. He'd have to put on some weight to play in the Steelers defensive line, to play in that 3-4 system. But I wouldn't hate it. I've got the guy I was saying earlier in the show for anyone that's joined since then. I literally have this guy in my Madden 2026 league that I'm on with, right now. So I don't hate it at all. I just don't think it's realistic for the Steelers. Then you got Graham Barton, interior offensive line out of Duke. Can't say I know deeply about this guy, but also he's not a guy that, he did have 5 games at center. I don't see him mocked there. And for as high as this guy's probably going to get drafted as a guard for the teams that need a guard, there's going to be the 3 centers in Van Pran, Zach Powers-Johnson, and Zach Frazier and Jackson Powers-Johnson. So I just don't think that the Steelers, I don't think he's realistically in the mix for the Steelers at this point in the first 2 rounds. Adonai Mitchell. Now, Mitchell out of Texas is a cool bloke. He had a bad pass to him at the end against Washington game that could have won them that game or tied it up, depending on where they went for it. Honestly, I would love to see him in Steelers colors. Second wide receiver, this would be Pickens Juju, like 3.0. in terms of getting that guy in the second. I just don't know if the Steelers go and do it. I just don't know if the Steelers go and do it, but I would not hate it. Another guy that I definitely have in my Madden franchise right now. Oh, really? You hadn't heard of Force Island? I knew what you were talking about, Pittsburgh, Toddy. I know what you're talking about. But yeah, it's a cool song. Definitely a cool song. Then you got Jackson Powers Johnson. Here we go. The guy that everyone loves, the guy that the Steelers apparently are talking to as well. At the start of the video, if you go back and replay it with an intro, a new intro I'm trialing, he's in there. The best center prospect. I think he will struggle to make it out of the first round. If he does, the Steelers better be ready to trade up to go grab that guy. And if he's picked at 20, don't be surprised. Don't hate it. He'll anchor the Steelers' offensive line for the next decade. He'll be huge. And he probably should send a nice Rolex or something to Creed Humphrey, because Creed Humphrey will have done this guy a lot of justice in making sure that the centers are drafted. Centers with good pedigree, good performance, good potential, good physicals, 4 Ps, get drafted adequately. So love this guy. Just pick the guy. Find a way to get him. Man, I'm disappointed when someone else, like when the Bengals or someone drops him. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback out of Alabama. He's pretty good. He's slipped way down the rankings. Again, really quite a physical guy. I think he's 6'1" and a little bit off the top of my head. Again, he could be a really good guy in the second round if he falls there. Someone might draft him in the back end of the first. I don't think he's worth taking for the Steelers at 20, apart from the fact that he is young. So it'll be interesting to see where this guy falls. Don't be surprised to see him the Steeler, but I don't sit there and go, oh my God, the Steelers have to go and get that guy tomorrow. Interesting. I like it. I always love what goes on in the live chat. It's what I love about live chat. It's like when Mark and I, 2 years ago, on the back of Steel Curtain Network, we did ended up having, some of you may be familiar in the live chat from this one. JW, you were definitely in there. When we did the pizza podcast, that was a lot of fun. Might have to do one of them again. Basically, we're doing a show. We're about 20 minutes into an hour and 10-minute show, and we ended up just talking pizza the whole time and game day food, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, totally Steel away shirt. Exactly. It totally helped change the mix. And again, as I know I say it all the time, but that idea of the 5th-year option is such a big thing to think about with the first round. How can you get cheaper at a position for a long time to come? Look at Najee right now. Now, if the Steelers take his 5th-year option, I think it's looking at 6. I've got to go back and look at this, but I think it's over $6 million a year, plus the bonus part. But ultimately, it would be cheaper than trying to do a new deal with a top 3 linebacker in the league, and he has 1,000 yards every season. Do I think the Steelers are worth picking him up? You'll find out in show to come soon, before the new league year starts. But yeah, it's an interesting concept having the 5th-year option. Then you got Zach Frazier, who Shannon White loves the heart of this guy, says that he can develop. He's a bit more developmental than Jackson Powers Johnson. But hey, if the Steelers go get a tackle early and Jackson Powers Johnson is not there early in the second and they feel like they can trade up to get him, or they just can't, they're not able to trade up to go get Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier you'd be pretty happy with him as your second best option. So this is a guy, continue to watch his process. There'll be less people in the mix for him, or he'll be a lesser commodity than Jackson Powers Johnson. But definitely a guy that you'd still love to have in your O-line. He looks pretty good. He's tough as freaking nails, and he's a team-first player. And as Shannon said in our show that we did about Senior Bowl prospects that I put out last night, which you can go back and watch as well. It was an interesting discussion about the early guys that were standing out, and the O-line particularly. But this is a guy that will be very committed and is very much a steal away, and that's important at the center spot, where it's kind of the most selfless position in the league, because really your main stats that you get judged on are rush yards, pass yards, pressures, etc. They're not stats that you do personally. We actually had a funny joke about how you could actually get a center to score a touchdown, so that's quite a bit of a quirky one. Then you got Cam Coleman. I really like this wide receiver. Again, you Steelers go get this guy in the second round. That would be awesome. Love that for them. I think I don't be surprised to see this guy after a good combine and draft process slip into the back of the first, or the middle of the first. But Keon Coleman, I know we all trust the wide receivers the Steelers draft. This guy paired in this would be an absolute weapon. If you got this guy, then you could remove on Deontay for sure. Or you definitely wouldn't be re-signing him. I don't mind Troy Franklin out of Oregon, but I do think there are other wide receivers that have not made the top 50 or that are after Troy Franklin's top 50 that I think are better than him. I think it helps him with his good route running, and it helps him that he's a junior, but I don't fully love it, and I wouldn't be thrilled if the Steelers took him in the first 2 rounds, but you'd have to back the Steelers. They always draft good wide receivers. So there we go. Michael Penix Jr., we talked about him a lot when we talked about the standouts from the Senior Bowl at the start of the show. I don't love him in the first round of the Steelers. If he fell to the second round, which he's just not gonna, hey, you get cheaper at cornerback. It's worth the punt in the second round, but I don't love it. I don't love it. I got to say. Javion Sanders, tight end, interesting for him out of Texas. I think the Steelers need to be investing in a top 3 round pick in a tight end, so that's kind of where I sit on that. And again, wouldn't hate it. I'm a Steelers fan. I'm a Texas Longhorns fan, but I just don't see it. And I wouldn't like where that he would be picked at that position. Then you got Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback out of Georgia. I like this guy. He is a junior, but I think you can get him in the second, and I think you can get him in the back end of the second. I don't think you need to. But again, we're pre-combine, we're pre-drills, we're pre-pro day, played at Georgia. If he runs like a really, really fast 40 time, does think really good things like the cone drill, marks up against wide receivers. This is a guy that could move himself back up the boards. I've seen him in some mocks and rankings at the back end of the first. I think he's in mid 2, late 2. I don't really think the Steelers need to move around to get him. But if they don't like some of their other prospects on the board, you go get this guy, you'll get better at cornerback instantly. So that's interesting with him. Then you got Xavier Worthy out of Texas. Look, I'm a Texas fan, like this guy a lot. I just don't think he fits what the Steelers need right now. Calvin Austin can do some of this stuff. Pickens can do some of this stuff, but this guy's not that good at combat catching. Deontay Johnson can do some of this stuff. They can go find guys that can do what he does well. They don't need to go after him. The only thing I would say is his return game's pretty cool, though. So, when he does do that. So, but I don't. The only reason why I would be cool with Xavier Worthy is if they brought back Mason Rudolph, because I think the pot shots he could take would be huge. Pittsburgh Toddy, I will 100% address that once we get through the top 50. That is a fantastic question. Fantastic question. And while I'm going through, though, everyone in the live chat, have a think about what you want to do too, because we'll put a poll out there. We'll see what you guys would prefer and what you do and don't like about it, because people always have an opinion on this. Lad McConkey, he again is a guy that's moved up in the boards. Danger Myers really does like him. He did talk about that on the podcast version where he went through this stuff, which I listened to earlier today. But again, I don't think I need to go there. Now, this is finally someone is backing my evaluation. I've been on Junior Colson for ages. He's on PFN. He's the 105th best prospect. If you look at their mock draft simulator, he's way down the list. He's not even in the top 8 or 9 linebackers. I really like Junior Colson. I think he's fantastic, hard hitter, big bloke. I think he's 6'3", 6'4". Again, we've got to see what the actual measurements are. He'll be 235, 240. He's a physical guy. He makes hits. You get this guy in the third. I'd be cool with him taking him in the second, but as long as center or tackle are addressed, I'm happy to take him before a cornerback, because I think you can fill cornerback better in free agency than you can a lot of other positions. If they get this guy manage to get this guy in the third, this will be better than getting Herbig in the fourth last year. Huge. And if they have him, Holcomb, and Landon Roberts, we're in for some time as Steelers fans. We'll be getting the linebacker position back into what we need to do. Awesome stuff. So I love this guy. Junior Colson's one of my favorite guys in the draft process. If you can get him in round 3, great. If you have to trade up to get back into round 2 and grab him, do it. I can't speak highly enough of this guy. There will probably be a video between now and the draft where I just focus on this guy and part of my player profiles that we'll be doing. But yeah, love Junior Colson. You got Bracewell. I really like Bracewell. I just don't think he's a need for the Steelers. It's a shame in a year if we did have that need. Go get freaking Bracewell again. I got him on my Madden team, freaking killing it. To the point I traded Alex Highsmith because when Bracewell was on the field, he was more productive. But I know that's Madden. But if you look at this guy, he in real life, obviously he was held back a little bit at Alabama, but this guy's got some huge flashes, does some huge things well. The question is a little bit around his run, setting the edge, just for everyone else's perspective out there. But it's something that he's just an explosive player. It's good. Peyton Wilson. So we talked about him at the start of the show. For the people that weren't in there at the start of the show, he was one of the linebackers I did preview going into the final few days at Senior Bowl on the channel as well. Huge. If you can get this guy in the third as well, or third or fourth, I think he's a midday to or earlier pick. So that's probably early third round or before. But yeah, this guy's played a stack of football, had a stack of tackles. I think it's like 380 or something, like over 25 tackles for a loss. I think it's actually in the 30s. He's had a bunch of sacks as well, like 12 to 20 sacks. Huge production on this guy. You'd love to see it. Like this guy's awesome, and he has had a really good Senior Bowl as well. So his stock's going to rise. You wouldn't hate it if there's certain other top linebackers off the board, or this is the guy facing you when you're there picking the third. You pick this guy. He's huge. He's like 6'4", like 238 pounds. Huge guy. Terrific. Highlight reel as well. So yeah, absolutely massive. Portner, I agree, but I'm not talking about trading up in the first or the second. I'm just saying straight moving up in a couple in the mid rounds outside the first round. I like that. That's good. I like. I do like that. Then we got Chavonde Sweat. Now I talked about him a little bit with Shannon White on the show we put out yesterday, but huge guy. Like I mean, like I know, like. The old Trump thing, but like the Trump huge thing is the perfect way to sum up this guy. This guy is like a Hodor in Game of Thrones, just like he's like a Hagrid. He's just a massive presence on a defensive line. I think you're testing at like 6'4" and like 340-pound plus. He just like good luck. I would love to Steelers draft him. I've seen some mocks where he goes in the first. Again, if he's there in the second and you've got your tackle or your center, if he manages to slip to the third, if he's in there at pick number 1 in the third, and you go up and you get that guy, you find a way to get that guy. This guy is just massive and just destroys pockets, destroys the run game, interior run game. I just love it. I just absolutely love it, particularly in the AFC. Like, good luck. Like, James Cook, the Bills ain't getting past this bloke. And you put this guy next to Hayward on one side, Benton on the other. You've got like TJ and Highsmith coming in. Like, it's a bad day for the opposing offense. It's just a bad day. And this guy can just destroy, like, lock that up for 4 or 5 years to come. Cam Hayward won't be here in 4 or 5 years' time. He'll be well retired. Then you can pay this guy too. This guy is massive. This guy's huge. He's massive. I think he's underrated as well. Yeah, they like the mountain as well. I was thinking of Hodor, the guy that like protects everyone. But yeah, this guy is he's like the Andre the Giant on defensive lines that are already full of Andre the Giants. Like, I don't know. We come up with another analogy, but like this guy's just huge. It's like when he walks onto the field, you can he should stomp on the field and do like fee, fi, fo, fum, like Jack and the Beanstalk. Like this guy's I can't speak highly enough of him. He's a good bloke. Then you go Marshawn Keeneland, edge player. Again, I don't think the Steelers in the mix for him. And then you get to my guy, depending on people caught into the video. But Malachi Corley, I previewed him. I talked about him to Shannon White a little bit. I talked about the start of this video because he was considered the standout by Daniel Jeremiah at the Senior Bowl. This guy's like 5'11". I saw him weighting at 205 pounds. So apparently he's tested more like 215 pounds at the Senior Bowl. He's been already compared a little bit to a Debo. Shannon White was saying to him it could be like a Sky Moore. This guy can do everything. He's a physical guy. He can obviously be used in the sweep game like that, or in some key rushing sets. He's also a guy that like can run some decent routes, good catching of the football, a heap of production as well. I've done a lot of prospects in the last 4 or 5 days, but I think he had one season where it was like 1,661 yards receiving. So it's actually like huge in terms of what this guy has been able to do in college and just rocket up the boards. So I'll actually pull him up. Well, let's look at him. We may as well. We got through the top 50. So he's just someone to watch. He's going to fly up the boards. I mean, even if he made it into back into the first, don't be surprised. All right, so he didn't have the 1,600-yard season, but he did have a 1,200, almost 1,300-yard season. Averaged 11.7 yards in college. Didn't do a lot of rushing in college. That wasn't really how he was used. But 29 TDs, pretty successful considering the amount of games that he played there, at playing 39 games as well. So it was almost a touchdown a game. Still away. Yeah, I was trying to think of something like, it's just Toronto Sweat is just a big bloke. He's just a big bloke. Hey, Darkstorm, no worries, mate. You can go back and replay it. We've got a bit to come. I can't believe we've ripped through the hour, but we are, and thanks, Toddy. Sorry. Thanks, Steelers Show, and hitting that like button. People, if you're new to the show channel too, consider hitting that sub button as well, even if you're listening to this on replay. We do have the live chat coming through on replay too. I noticed that YouTube wasn't doing that, which kind of takes the fun out of rewatching a live show. So I think, man, going on the back end and I fixed that. But Darkstorm, don't worry. We're about to hit Q&A because that wraps up our top 50 players according to Daniel Jeremiah's first top 50. Remember, he does about 3 or 4 of these through the draft process. Then he does a 150. That's kind of interesting as well. There's usually Steelers pick out of those guys. Now, remember, these are his rankings and don't always go that way. There's guys sometimes that slip, but there's also a lot of guys that move way up from these rankings and end up getting picked on draft day that you aren't seeing mocked as well. So that's kind of the interesting thing. But we will kick off the Q&A, so people load it up in there. But there was a Q&A all the way back from Toddy. What's more likely, trading up or trading down? It's a fantastic question. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball to know what the Steelers will do or not do. When I say trade back, I know I liked what Still Wade said. Never trade down for the first. Almost always in the second. Yeah. So if you look at some teams, the Ravens, the Rams, I think the Eagles have done it pretty well over the last 4 or 5 years, where they've had multiple second and third round picks have ended up Pro Bowlers and not either had a first rounder or the first rounder's not been a Pro Bowler. And it was a big reason why a lot of them made Super Bowls over the last in the last decade. Particularly when you look at what the Rams were doing and how deep they were going in the NFC, but make the Super Bowl they made with Goff, but then also the Super Bowl they won with Stafford. So second round, third round are super valuable. What I'm a big believer is when you're picking at 20, like the Steelers are, and when we said it with Pickett, we saw, with Broderick, they traded up from, 17? You're going to add 20, you've got to invest a lot to move up. Now, there were all sorts of trades. There were like something like, I think it was 4 or 6 trades in the year we drafted Pickett in those teams where people were jumping all over each other to get cornerbacks, and the Ravens moved up to get Linderbaum, and then there was cornerbacks or wide receivers. Remember, that was like a Olave and some of those guys. So it was all over the place there. I'm not out on Steel. I'm cool with the Steelers drafting back somewhere between like 20 and 26, because I prefer like 20 to 23, 24, as long as they acquire a third or a second or a really high fourth that allows them to get back into the third later on, with a late pick from, 20 from next year's draft process. That's what I want to see. I'm open to it if they don't absolutely love the prospect there at 20. The reason I say this is because you need as many picks as you can get. And I think that with the talent that's on the board in this draft overall, at a number of positions, usually there's like a decent amount of talent, but it's few and far between some positions. There's a good, decent amount of talent, particularly what the Steelers need in the line. And if you trade it back to 24, 25, then if you draft Jackson Powers-Johnson as a center at 25, you're laughing. Now, Linderbaum went pretty high a couple of years back. I think it was, 15 for the Ravens when they drafted him, 15, 16. Maybe it was 17, but I feel like my memory says it was 15. So you draft Jackson Powers-Johnson there. I'm cool with that. And you've got a mid-round pick that you can then fill another need. The problem I will say is that most of the tackles we've talked about, unless Morgan slips, by the end of the first round, you're going to see 7 or 8 tackles gone, and then it gets a bit few and far between. So that's the one thing, though. If you don't get a tackle in the first round, you're kind of stuffed. But I'm cool with the Steelers pretty much apart from the first round pick next year in case they need that for a quarterback. I'm cool with them using a second or a third round pick to move back into the early rounds this year because of what I talked about earlier in the show around, the concept of the transfer portal, people mixing up their scheme all the time, development being interrupted, and also the fact you're getting really experienced college guys because of the COVID year eligibility. But the question was, which is more likely? I think first round, not moving. Second round, moving up. Third round, it increases moving up. Fourth round, maybe moving back because you acquire a fifth or a sixth. That's how I feel today. It's probably a question to keep asking me. I'd love to know what the live chat though thinks. Are you for trading up or trading down, or which do you think is more likely? It's a fantastic question. Fantastic question. And I like what Wade Show immediately came back with. Portner asked, do you think the previous talk of Tomlin taking a year off was put out by his camp to get pressure for an extension? I don't think so. No, I don't. There's some interesting narratives out there. I think there was pressure out there. I think there was a lot of, well, any other team would go hire him. Sure, he'd lean into his friend group, but I almost don't think Tomlin needs to be honest. Like, it's pretty obvious. Like, we know a lot of teams wanted him. There was those rumors about, Washington a few years back, particularly because his son was at Maryland at the time. His daughter's going to Georgia. Like, I think there's enough pressure in terms of with Mike Tomlin. I don't think the Steelers want to move Mike Tomlin on. It's like that whole thing where, Chuck Noll had some crap seasons. So did Cowher. Mike Tomlin's never had the losing season. He's probably got two of them before he got the sack. Maybe not at this point. If it was a few years back, it would be different. Maybe it's 1 year, but like, I don't know. Tomlin teams are going to win. I think Tomlin's got this job until he doesn't want it anymore. All right, let's bring up the next question. Thanks for Toddy. How many times does the bloke get to change his mind about the top 50? And do people from Australia just... Well, they're not my top 50. They're Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. He gets 4 goes at it. I think he usually does 4. My top 50. So I last year did a top 75 that I got out right before the draft. I kept umming and ahhing on some guys. I picked top 75 based on 3 days. We'll start off with a top 90 this year. We've got Senior Bowl this weekend. I'm going to some sports games here in Australia. I'm going to the cricket, an Aussie thing, tomorrow. So I'm going to be doing some work over the next week on my top 90. So that's 30 players across 3 days that are Steeler fits. I'm hoping to have that out right after the Super Bowl. And we will do a live show for that. We will launch that. We'll do a live special. I'll make sure we'll probably do that about 8 p.m. East Coast time so that the West Coast of the US can join as well, lunchtime in Australia. So we will do that one. But yeah, I'll have my first top 90. I will do another one probably after the combine as well. And then we will do one probably when the pro days are kind of started. And then I'll do one after free agency heading into the draft as things further develop. So yeah, we'll do 3 and I'll cut it down. So we'll move from 90 to 75 through that process. The first 2 will probably be 90s and then I'll cut it down and get really ruthless. But the Steelers picked last year with the top 75. Almost every pick was in the top 75 players in the end. So in fact, yeah, I think they all were. Yeah, they all were. They were all in there. So yeah, that was, I mean, that makes sense. So it was pretty clear what some of the things the Steelers were going to do, but I had Corey Trice in there as well. The only one I didn't have, I might have had Spencer Anderson in the top 75. I think he was in my day 3 players. I think we had everyone. I'll have to go back and have a look at that before I do that show, but I'm dead certain we actually had everyone. And do people, not really. I mean, one of my best mates I'm going to the cricket with tomorrow was a groomsman at my wedding as a Kiwi. The only thing, drunk Kiwi when they're smashing Australia at rugby, it's not a fun thing to be around. That's all I'll say. Drunk Kiwis are always great to be around. But yeah, no, we're cool. There's a thing called the Anzacs, and there's the Anzac spirit. So yeah, no, we're good. We all have the Kiwis. Jedel says there's a coin toss with Khan. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And what I would say is, I like my analytics and stats. I think anyone that is a sub of this channel or watched a few videos of this channel, obviously I love my stats. So does Omar Khan. He's a numbers guy, and the analytics on the second and the third round and getting cheaper are really important, but the analytics on all the financials on being able to have a fifth-year option on a key position with talent is also really attractive. So it's kind of interesting. And then you look at what Detroit have done last year. They got Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. They're both on guaranteed 4-year contracts. Then they've got their fifth-year options. They could be two linchpins on the offense and the defense, young guys to build around. So, the idea of trading up into the first is good. It's a shame that Pickett didn't show more last year. And I mean, we all know all those different narratives. If he had, I'd be kind of even open to like using a first this year, the next year to get back into the first this year because there's some really good talent there. Portner says, and yeah, keep throwing the questions in. I'll go for at least another 10, 15 minutes if we've got enough questions. Waddle's a Philly dude. He'll go, yeah, totally. I mean, I did a mock yesterday that had, I think I went Latham, who slipped in the first, Guyton had been picked. Then I went Latham, Zach Powers, Johnson. Like they were who I walked away with the first 2 rounds, and I thought that that for Steel fans will be pretty awesome. Like I think no one would complain about that. I also got Fagua yesterday as well in one of them, and then Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean, if we walked away with that, I mean, the line is going to be with Broderick Jones there. That is going to be, he is just lights out. That is just going to be, that would be a dream come true for the run game. Oh yeah, we didn't get to strong safety. Sorry, Jer. So yeah, strong safety, it's interesting. There's not a lot of guys in this draft process. So yeah, Edmonds could be a really interesting guy that they do bring back. So I kind of like, yeah, I wonder what the Steelers are going to do there because like surely Neal's going to go, or if Neal's there, he's just a depth piece. So I just, I just think the Steelers have got to do something though, because it's a really key position for stopping tight ends, and there's a lot of tight ends in the AFC when you look at the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, all the guys that are there ahead of them, and you've got to be able to stop them. I know Kazi isn't a strong safety. Kazi's like 5'10" and like 176 pounds. He hits like a strong safety sometimes, but he can't cover those guys. And that's a challenge. There is a guy, I got him at the back end last night in a mock, so I'm going to do some analysis on him. There's a guy at Oregon State called Kitten Oldapo. And this guy apparently, he's not a very agile safety, but the one thing he can do is he can hit downhill and he can mark up on tight ends really well. I got him in the 6th on the 7th. Cool. Steelers did that. Just have a tight end, a safety specialist to go after against tight end. Yeah, it's an interesting question, Toddy. Particularly because people wondered whether Baker would be an option. Baker wants like 40 mil, and probably can get it. Really interesting. I'm kind of keen to see where Jimmy Garoppolo ends up after all of this. He might find himself on the way out. You can find that guy cheap. I really don't want Russell Wilson there. But I feel like if Mason goes, I feel like someone's tempted to bring in Russ, and he's got to be the veteran develop. I think I'll hate it. It's not going to work. But yeah, that's a really good question. Look, you know what? Pittsburgh Toddy, I will do an investigation on options there. I will do a video this week on the channel about that question. Let me think about that deeply. What do I think about Cooper DeJean? I want to see what he weighs against, or what he weighs as, though, because I don't think, unless you're going to move Minka to strong safety, and I don't fully love that. Yeah, I don't mind it. I think he can totally do it. I'm not going to say that at all, but I want to make, I would want to make sure. I think the Steelers need a 210+ pound safety, if you're not a strong safety. And Minka's a good free safety. So I don't know. I don't hate it. But I just think he could be this Swiss Army knife across the, and so versatile in scheme wise. So, yeah, I wouldn't hate them drafting him because I think of what he can do for you, but I'm not sitting here and going, oh my God, he's the next, key safety for them. I don't know, man. Maybe. But yeah, I'm not a Rabbits fan, so I don't know. He's talked pretty disparagingly if you go back and look at interviews about rugby league, actually. Kind of interesting. But yeah, that's a good point about Cooper though. The other thing though is like about converting guys. Not every guy works. Like, when you look at Patrick Peterson, he played okay, but he couldn't tackle as safety. So that's the other thing. It comes down to tackling. I know Cooper's a pretty decent tackler, but there are some other more physical guys at cornerback in this draft. So yeah, I think you get a little bit of the whole white and black thing in here. You've got the guy that we had, Riley Moss out of Iowa last year before. He was kind of in a similar boat with Cooper. But Cooper's so versatile. I think versatility is very important. And even Mike Tomlin's talked before about positionless football. So it's an interesting concept for sure. Thanks, Steeler Girl 808. See you later. Really appreciate your comments in the live chat. But yeah, we'll wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. Unless there's any more questions, throw them into the live chat. I'll answer them. But yeah, is anyone going to watch the Senior Bowl? Does anyone pick a team? It's funny. So they released the starters for the national and the American team. And I found myself really liking the national team again. I felt like I liked them a year or two ago as well. Like, it's quite funny. I feel like those are just a team I've ended up having because I've liked the prospects on them. But there are a couple of other guys that I'll just mention if you haven't caught some of the early videos in the week. Look out for a guy like Sam Hartman at the Senior Bowl as well, quarterback. Out of Wake Forest, played last season at Notre Dame. He can be a really interesting guy late as well. You've got Vidal, Kamani Vidal at Troy. He's a running back. I really like him late. I think he could be an interesting prospect for Steelers. You got the massive wide receiver, 6'7", out of Florida State, and Johnny Wilson. You got Jacob Cowing, who I mentioned, the wide receiver out of Arizona. He's a guy to watch. We talked about Fisk earlier on in the show. Braden Fisk. So out of Florida State previously. Before that, he was at Western Michigan. So there's definitely a lot of different depth at some key positions here for the Steelers. And that's the point of this show, is I wanted to start taking you through some of these prospects. We will get into as well. Mark and I are both having very conflicting day job schedules at the moment, but we did a lot of the mock drafts last year. We did a mock draft Monday kind of thing for everyone. I will bring that back regardless. Hopefully Mark and I can find a way to do some of that stuff together. But, it is a challenge for us both at the moment. That's just life. But I will be bringing them back, and I will put them out to you guys as well, and we'll pick some together. I'll run you through some of the options there because it was some really cool content, and I enjoyed listening back to it myself, actually. So Steel Wade says, I'll disappointingly watch the game. It would have been cool if it was a good game. Well, how do you know? It's not been played yet. Don't be negative on that one. Although last year, the back end of that one, Tyler Badgett, who's now with the Chicago Bears, some of the back end of that game was pretty average, actually. The year before was a better Senior Bowl game to watch. Sometimes they go a bit long. It can be a bit long. And then when I looked at the national team, they had like 4 running backs. That's a lot of guys to cycle through with the reps. So yeah, but the kind of the cool thing is a little bit toward that garbage time sometimes in those games. And it's not garbage time for those guys, those lesser prospects. That's a really important time for them to move their draft stock up the board. Guys, like, look out for my guy, the tackle, Christian Jones. I've been talking about him for a while. I've been alluding to him. We talked about him earlier in the week. And then he made the podcast with Zerline and Daniel Jeremiah as a guy that's like starting to really prove himself, that's probably moving from a 6th to a 4th round pick. I really like Christian Jones out of Texas. Look at him. He's always flashes on tape. He's always around big plays. But that's that garbage time is for those guys, and it's also for guys that have possibly can play different positions. For example, Cordell Volson, offensive tackle out of North Dakota State University, who actually plays on the Bengals. I said he would probably be a guard in the NFL. He played pretty good at guard. He played guard and tackle at the East West Shrine Bowl, then moved across. So there'll be guys that move across also from the East West Shrine Bowl that play in the Senior Bowl. He moved across to that, and he played pretty well at guard, and then he ended up getting drafted a couple of rounds higher than what people had projected him, and he's played a few games now for the Bengals. So that's the other thing too, is the Senior Bowl can be a good chance for some players to play different positions. You saw Cody Mork play basically all 5 positions last year before getting drafted into the Buccaneers. So Senior Bowl can do a lot of that as well. Am I hyped about Pro Bowl? Nope. Not really. Not really. Yeah. Oh, you like Jones? Yeah. What do you like about him, Reginald? Because, I mean, for me, I was a Texas fan. I thought he was going to come out last year. I thought he did the right thing by not. I think in terms of helping his draft spot. What do you? Yeah, if you not meant to put you on the spot, but yeah, I'd love to know what you like about him as well. I just think he's a really solid guy. Like, he just anchors. Like, you don't move that guy, and he's a big bloke. Christian Jones. I think he's 6'6", like actually tested. Christian Jones, Texas. I think he's literally like 6'6". So yeah, but he's played like a heap of games. He's an experienced guy. He's like 61 games, 48 starts. Like, just big bloke, big run, big bloke. And he can be a nice right tackle for you too. Like, really nice right tackle for you. So thanks, Still Wade. I appreciate it. Yeah, I love it. It's a Friday night last night. I spent a couple of hours doing producing the show that we put out last night. It was getting ready for this one. And then also we've got another show coming out tomorrow. It's a bit of like an encore show that I did with Shannon White. We are going to talk about Arthur Smith and very much about like the role he'll play and what it means for Kenny Pickett. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. So yeah, the content does not stop. But I love the draft. I've always loved the draft. I mean, they were talking about Dan Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks about 6 to 8 months ago. We're talking about, I've been doing the podcast for like 10, 11 years. I think I've been listening to them since like literally the start, and always been into the draft ever since. And so that's the other thing I should say for everyone listening live. We will have draft content. I know some of you also listen to Steelers Nation Australia. I know Mark will be doing sort of stuff. He and I haven't talked about what his specific plans are. But last time we did day 3 starting at 2 a.m. in the morning for us. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to be there. We're definitely doing some stuff in the first round. Shannon White's hopefully going to be just joining me for that. He might join me for the day 2 stuff as well. So yeah, I'll do day 2. Definitely, we'll definitely do some stuff around day 1. But day 3, I'll be going at it from 2 a.m. in the morning my time. So that'll be wild. Last year it was wild. 6-hour live stream. I'm going to try and get a few other guests from the Steelers sort of podcast, media, writing community that I know as well. So it'll be interesting sort of stuff like that. But yeah, we're going to wrap it up. So cool, Elaine. Yeah, Shannon and I have known each other a long time. Actually, he won't mind me saying this, but Shannon and I, and this we'll close out the show with this. But Shannon and I actually started out, which is funny. I've got a few really close friends like this. Started out arguing about players in the back when it was behind the Steel Curtain, now Steel Curtain Network, the Slack channels. We disagreed on a few things, but we always respected each other, and we found we had a lot more commonality than we did not. And I love talking Steelers with him. He's a super experienced guy. He's a super thoughtful guy. Great bloke off camera too. Always, I love it. And so I know he does too. We shoot each other messages all the time. It's great to be able to talk Steelers from the other side of the world, and it shows the community, and that's what's here. We're all here for the Steelers community everywhere in the world. The Steelers are the world's team. Who cares about the Cowboys being, America's team? I don't think they are America's team. Steel fans, way more Steel fans, way more cheering at different away games. And actually, that's a good time to say I am probably going to a Steelers game, depending at all, like 80% likelihood, I will be at their week 2 or week 3 game, whether it's home or away this season. So I will have more to share about that. If it is in Pittsburgh, we will look to organize some sort of like tailgate sort of thing. I'll give everyone plenty of notice so people are thinking about, you're in the position to or would like to travel in for that game, or if it's, feasible if you do that anyway. Would love to meet up with all of you guys out there. So I will share more as we lead into that with months and months of notice. So I just need the schedule to come out, which comes out after the draft. Once the schedule comes out, I'll be able to confirm what I'm doing. But yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We've had a really positive live chat. We had a heap of people tuning in. If you're watching this back as well, obviously it's from long content. But yeah, I hope you enjoy all these prospects. And hopefully as well, this will help you through the draft process. You can come back to this video. You can look at, oh yeah, Matty talked about that bloke. Or, oh, I've heard that guy talk about whether that's a fit for the Steelers. That's not what Matty said. But yeah, let me know in the comments too if you come back to it, think about it, some of these prospects. If you're keen on a particular prospect, you want me to dive into that, I'm happy to do that. I want to put out content there that you guys want to listen to. But yeah, thanks for the cool comments, J Devil. Good night, 46ers. We know what we all mean there. And good night, Steeler Nation in America. Good day or g'day for all the Steeler Nation in Australia. All right. As always, go Steelers.